And I was going to do a long intro, but I think it's just better with your words than mine when it comes to what the ethical dilemma and is when it comes to AI. I think we have an amazing couple of people here to join you, Ron, and I will let all of you introduce yourselves. I have Michael here in the studio with me, and then I would like to hand over to my former colleague and amazing leader of responsible AI, Christina. Would you like to take it away?
Thank you. So, my name is Christina.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
No, we're not hearing you well at all.
No. Let's see.
Is it possible you have the video from SwapCard running at the same time?
Can you hear us, Christina?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
You sound better now.
Yeah, it sounds much better now.
Sounds better.
I will again, you have to start over, but welcome, Christina. Great to have you here.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here as well. So thank you. Christina Graval is my name. I'm from Nordea, where I work on driving some of the ethical and AI governance questions in the bank. I also work as a product owner of a machine learning project within financial crime prevention. So that's very short about me. And then maybe over to you, Arthur, for a short introduction.
Yes, certainly. So I'm Arthur Barrell. I run the data science team at the Royal Bank of Canada, RBC. We've attempted to cover as many of the data science disciplines as possible. Obviously, we cover machine learning. We also cover location intelligence. We do all the third-party data for RBC. And we also look after all the climate change studies. And of course, we do trustworthy AI.
Awesome to hear. Thank you very much. And Ron, I hope everyone heard your very nice speech. If someone else joined just now, who are you in one sentence?
So I'm leading engineering at the Vector Institute and Schwartz Reisman Institute in Toronto. New role for me, so focusing on how do we transfer research into beneficial applications and work on responsible AI.
Thanks a lot, Ron. And over to you, Mikael, in the studio.
Thank you very much. My name is Mikael Munk. I'm the founder CEO of 2021 AI. We are a scale-up out of Copenhagen, focused on both the development process cycle, operation of AI, and then the governance, the regulatory compliance for AI models.
Thank you very much. We have prepared a few questions here for the panel debate. And one of the first questions is why ethics is important. So I think you, Ron, you came into it in the end of your session, which is a nice then translation into this. So in the theory of ethics, is actually helping us to determine right from wrong behavior, also when there's lack of laws and regulations. There's a growing awareness of the large-scale impacts of AI systems and recognition also that existing regulations and norms in industry and academia are insufficient to ensure responsible AI development. Hence, why we have AI ethics and why it's important today is because the field and society has self-identified that there might be harm with how we do things today, and we should try to define what are the right behaviors to drive sustainable technology development to benefit the bigger audience. In Nordea, why we think ethics is important, we try to phrase it in a bit of a simpler way. So when we move over from humans determining the rules into letting systems determine the rules for us, how do we ensure that we stay true to our values and code of conduct? So what is your view on why this is important, Arthur?
Just unmuting. I have some construction going on at my place, so I'm being careful with the mute. Actually, let me argue a little bit with that. That the idea that humans overseeing the decision, that's an unbiased process. That's not necessarily true. So the approach that we've adopted to it is that all decisions should be subject to review by an impartial AI, that we should be identifying and detecting. This is very disconcerting, looking at myself talking. The idea that we should be, the idea is that we should be monitoring all of those aspects, and not just from a regulatory standpoint. It would be very easy to say, yes, as regulations, we'll adhere to the regulations, and now we have a get out of jail free card, and we've done well. That's not true either, because there's still the court of public opinion that we have to be well behaved with respect to as well. So the approach that we've adopted to this, just following up on your question, is that we're really paying attention to the decisions in general. So we want that. We want the risk monitored. We want the regulatory aspect, but we also want the code of common view, also recognizing that we're being well behaved and that we've eliminated the bias as much as we possibly can.
That's fantastic, and I really want to elaborate a little bit more on that. But also, just before that, I want to hear your view, Mikael, on from your point of view and your company on this.
Yes, most certainly. So I think at the broader perspective, what we're seeing is that over time we will want to implement more and more AI. And the reason for that is because it can really help us save in terms of resources. So point being, we will do less work that repetitive work. We will save energy, we will save many things by optimizing with AI. It also means that the impact of these models are going to increase over time, right? So we're going to be impacted more and more. And it also then again leads to the next thing is that we have to trust these. We have to trust these models. It also leads to the point that the companies operating these models have to be trusted, right? So when I give my data or allow an organization to work with my data, develop a model for good purposes, of course, towards me, I need to trust these results. So there's a whole circle here that goes along from the consumer to the company to the wider ethics, right? And then you can say global responsibility of reducing waste of different kinds of resources.
Awesome, thank you. And you're touching here upon trust. And Ron, you also talked about this a little bit in your previous session. So how do you ensure trust?
Yeah, I mean, so I think definitely important points are one, that when you have an AI system, there's a lot less transparency into it, right? So like if you would have problems in a human-driven system, you're likely to get a whistleblower to come forward and identify those problems, right? And in fact, we build a lot of process that assumes that there will be some guardrails on untrustworthy behavior because of that. But in an AI system, it can be inscrutable. It's possible that no one even knows that bad things are happening, right? Without the transparency, right? So I think trust has to start with transparency and accountability, right? Which is like, that notion that leadership take it seriously and understand that they need to feel as confident that what's happening in a business process with AI in it, that there is responsible for that as one that has a team of people doing things, right? So I think that those are really important parts of trust. The other thing I think is incredibly important is, in some sense, to have the right kind of regulatory environment so that you don't have bad actors have a competitive advantage, right? That good actors find themselves struggling to compete with organizations that cut corners or ignore ethics. So I think those are all important aspects of trust. And I think we'll talk more about, how do you also get to a world where it's easier to have that transparency and trust, and it doesn't become a big tax on an organization.
Great, thank you. And around this, as you're stating here about less transparency, I think this is a really interesting point, and also to improve the understanding of actually potential risks. So how could we actually look at, for example, the risk management within this area to improve in these around these topics, Arthur?
Yes, just before I dive into that, just wanted to append something to what Ron said, that I'm sure organizations all around the world have built AI-based systems for testing the reliability of the decision process and the trustworthiness. But one of the things I find fascinating is, how do you test the trust tester? Right? How do you make sure that it itself is not biased, given that the people overseeing it are probably biased, and the machine has essentially become biased as well, right? So that, to me, that's one of those fascinating problems. It's eventually, I think it becomes an iterative loop until you eventually get to something that everybody says, yes, we're all good with that. Sorry, I grabbed an end of Ron's commentary there. But I also wanted to address what you've said. One of the things that we're working on very hard right now is to include the trust testing process right inside our DevOps pipeline. So we have some rigorous DevOps pipelines that drive our applications out to the rest of the world, and also internally. And that DevOps process intrinsically should include at every step the capability to check whether bias has been introduced into the system and whether the results can be completely trusted. And by doing that, what we're essentially saying was that at least the model has been verified by ourselves. If some outside bad actor attempts to bias the model, okay, we can't catch that in the DevOps process, but at least we've got the foundation of trust.
Thank you, and maybe over to Mikael, who directly works on that platform for enabling that.
Yes, most certainly. So I like the point about the, let's call it, technical solutions about identifying both biases, generating more transparency, and just to that point, I think from transparency, there's a layer in between before you come to trust, and that is that what we want is that the models become more fair, right? And we must expect that is what our companies also will want. The point here is also that in these implementations, there will be very technical people, very data savvy people. There will be data scientists who talks this language. But there's a whole compliance governance function that don't talk this language. So there's also a big challenge here now in ensuring that the existing compliance governance framework in the financial institution, or actually across institutions, also have a chance to, both at a platform level, but also in general, to include their rules. They will have certain rule sets. They will have a different language for doing this. They will want to see segregation of duties as one point. They will want to see that the 4 lines of defense in a financial institution actually can work together on this. So I think a key point here is that we are used to, when we talk about monitoring, governing, and compliance around anything we do in our organizations, to sort of throw paper at each other, right? So we fill in schedules, and it's the same thing we're seeing now with the impact assessments popping up, right? Some of them will become regulation, some of them will be good guidelines, but there's 130, 140 of these out there. So one thing is that we can keep shuffling this paper around for, did we do this or did we not do this? But we need a more integrated, collaborative approach to risk management. Also because these are new technologies and there are new risks, and we have to learn and we have to work together on that across the different silos in an organization. So I think that's a key. You need really a platform and a much more digital approach to this than what we're used to doing in the organizations today.
And a more collaborative approach on how to work across the lines of defense, as I hear you as well.
Yes.
Saying, yeah, great. Thanks. Ron, you mentioned that also in regards to your best practices around process, where you mentioned governance and inclusion. Do you have any points on what Mikael said here in regards to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is important to have more automation. I think, I definitely amplify the notion that a lot of times risk management is looked at as a compliance function, sort of a minimum standard of what must be done, and that leads to a lot of heavyweight process. But the more mature and better understood the risk, sort of the more having well-defined process around what are the exact risks to tackle makes sense, right? But the reality is, I think we've seen, that there's a lot of unintended consequences can come about from machine learning systems. When you optimize one thing, it has a tendency to push other variables to extremes if they're not constrained. So I think you really have to have an explicit notion of assessing what are the risks with a broad, diverse perspective up front, and prioritizing what are the risks, right? And then thinking hard about, like, how can you measure and track, right, what's going on, right? So it's not just about getting everything right up front, but it's around quick feedback loops and detecting when things might be going wrong, right? Like, part of what's complicated about these systems is you can't just simulate behavior in advance and know how it's going to work. But, live tests, you have to watch what's the dynamic of the system, right? Like, if you change credit decisions, how is that affecting over time credit worthiness of different applicant pools, right? So there's been some interesting work with simulators on that, but I think, that's an important aspect as well.
Great, thanks. I think just a comment from our side here in Nordea, we actually spend a lot of time in educating around risk identification for these specific teams, and it's also something that has for these projects with AI and machine learning, and it's also something that we see is greatly appreciated. I see we're running out of time a little bit. Do we have any questions from the audience, or some last words here from comments from you, Arthur, on some of the topics?
Yeah, thank you, Christina. I think there's one more thing I could probably add, and that is that while this is a relatively new space that we're playing in, I think we can learn from other spaces where we've been quite successful. And the one that I keep picking on is QA. In the process of putting together an application and releasing it, we have developed really good practices with respect to QA. QA is present at the beginning of a project, it's present through the process of a project, it's present before the release of a project. It used to be that you added QA on at the end. I've finished, so now QA takes over. That's not the case anymore. I think that we can learn from that with respect to the trust process as well.
Thanks a lot. Fantastic ending. Over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you. That was super interesting to listen to. When working in a financial institution, who do you look to when you work with ethical AI? And who would be the role model to look at? I guess that's for you guys who do that, like Christina and Arthur.
That's a really good question.
Yeah, first of all, I would actually question my my management and look into who's owning in the company the code of conduct, and have they thought about these questions. So start actually questioning that within your own company. That's how we started the dialogue on the importance and raised the importance within our company.
I'd agree with that. Christina. I think that's true. In our case, for example, we have a risk reputation operating committee that reviews everything that a customer could conceivably see. We have privacy commissioners. We have we've got all the security parts as well. So I think you're right, Christina. It's got to start inside your company.
Perfect.
And also, yeah, I mean, ethical considerations is something that the bank is quite, well known of taking care of ethical issues.
Right.
So there is processes for that as well. Great.
Super. Thank you so much. It's been a very enlightening panel. Really happy that you could all join, and hope to see you somewhere soon.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.